Dr. Akiva Gamliel, Belk, Dean of Jewish Studies at the Noach Torah Institute, LLC. Welcome to Gematria Shemot. Baruch Hashem. Dear ones, time has just flown by. Just 11 weeks ago we were beginning, and here we are concluding after 11 weeks. This is our textbook, Mysterious Signs of the Torah Revealed in Exodus. I encourage you to pick a copy up. It's so valuable information. And there's information in this week's discussion that just will not be able to be included in the video. We're just going to take one small section. In Mitzvah Shem, next week, we're going to begin with Mysterious Signs of the Torah Revealed in Leviticus. So please pick up your copy now so you'll be available to follow along next week. Now, dear ones, last week was Parshat Gematria Shemot Pekudei. They were combined, and we only did Vayekel. This week we're doing Pekudei, and hopefully on Shabbat Pesach we'll level out again with what the community does. The community does a Parshat each week, and when it's not a leap year where we have 13 months, when it's only 12 months, it's necessary to combine more than one Parshat occasionally, and this week was one of those times, like this last week, when we had the Akiva Pekudei. However, today we have a very important discussion that I want to make sure that we spend some time with, and I didn't feel like we could do both last week, and so we're going to approach it a little differently. We're in Exodus chapter 38, verse 21 through 40, verse 38. And this is our last week with this particular textbook. Now, our discussion is entitled, Everyone is Important. And my heart really reaches out to individuals who feel excluded, who feel left out. So many individuals write to us, and we're appreciative of the communications. Thank you for writing to us, and thank you for expressing how you feel and sharing with us burdens upon your heart. And one of the burdens on individuals' hearts are that not being Jewish, they feel so isolated at times, so left out, so not included. And so that's why I wanted to take a little time in this particular discussion in Pekudei, because everyone is important. And we don't want to make anyone feel like you're not important. That's so far from the truth. Everyone is important. Now we know there's individuals that watch our videos and do our studies, and they may not have any background whatsoever in Judaism, and so we don't want them to feel excluded. We want them to also feel important. There's individuals who might be descendants of those who were Jewish, but through a period of assimilation are not included, and we want you to feel included. We want you to realize you're very important. Then there's individuals who are like me that may have been raised in another religious belief and didn't reconnect with Judaism. I did, thank God. I'm a Baal Teshuvah. I returned to Judaism. And perhaps someday you will be a Baal Teshuvah also and return to Judaism. And of course we have those that have returned. And everyone is important. Now, one of the textbooks that we have is entitled, Would You Like to Be Jewish? We're going to be discussing this in another class beginning here the next week or so. And we want you to know that we have this book. We've written, Would You Like to Be Jewish? And Would You Like to Be Jewish Too? We've written 2 books so that you will realize at the Noach Torah Institute, everyone is important. We don't want anyone to feel like you're not important. Now, we might see things in the Holy Scriptures differently, but that doesn't mean that you're not important. You are important to your Creator. Now, in our textbook this week, we talk about over 700 religions, the splinters, and we talk about the divisions. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to say, look, let's all come together, let's be of similar mind, everyone is important. We need to recognize the significance of each individual. Now, dear ones, as we begin our discussion here, I wanted to read from the first paragraph of chapter 11 in the book. In the Parshat this week, our attention is drawn to those who are not the planners of the Mishkan, or the contractors, or even the laborers. They are there, they are important, and their contribution is important, but they may not actually be seen. Dear ones, Rabbi Eli Monk wrote that in Exodus chapter 38:28, there were 1,775 shekels that were mentioned. And the reason these shekels were mentioned, silver shekels, was because Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to give a full accounting of everything that was spent on the Mishkan. So there would be no improprieties, there would be no thoughts of improprieties or any thoughts of wrongdoing or being out of sync with what God has ordered. Now, these 1,775 shekels were used for silver hooks. Silver hooks are so important in the Mishkan. And so even though when we're standing and we're looking at the Mishkan, we can't see the silver hooks, but they're there. And even though there are individuals that are listening and watching and reading, and they're not writing and they're not communicating, they're there. And you are very important. Now, dear ones, I tried to do my own simple drawing here, so please understand I don't claim to be an artist. But this is one of the poles. And the pole has this hook driven into the wood, and the hook stands out like so, okay? And the curtain hook, the curtain circle, drops down onto it, kind of like if you were in a shower, you have a shower curtain that has a little round hook there, and it catches, and the curtain is held up by these rods and the hook. And that's the silver hook right there. Now, why am I making such a big deal about the hook? Well, first off, I'm not. This is what the Torah is teaching us, okay? Now, the word vav is spelled vav, vav. That's how it's spelled, vav, vav. The Gematria is 6 plus 6 is 12. And the word vav means hook. But the actual way the vav is used in HaTorah, it's used to connect different pasukim, different verses, and the different chapters and books of HaTorah together, so that we recognize God has His brand of where a thought begins, of where a situation begins, and where it concludes. And so it's kind of branded. It's in between this area in the Holy Scripture. And so we'll come back to that in a minute. That's, God willing, that's very important. Now, the Vav is noted this week in the Parshat, and it's Vavim. And the word Vavim means hooks, okay? So we have the two Vavs there, and we have a Yud and a Mem. And the Gematria is 62. Now, the Gematria of Bain, which means to divide or to separate, is also 62. And so, on the one hand, we have the hooks, which connect us, and on the other hand, we have the bane, which separates us and divides us. And so while separation sometimes is necessary and division sometimes is necessary, yet within the brands, within the vav, that begins a thought, a sentence, a story, telling an important fact in HaTorah or in HaTanakh, until the concluding letter, that's branded together. It's sewn together. It's woven together. It's not to be taken one little piece out and just misrepresented. It's all part of one grouping that God has put brands in. He's identified the beginning and the ending, and it's there. And yet some individual will take a pasuk, a verse, out of context, and they'll make something out of it that doesn't exist, that isn't part of it, it isn't real. You have to look at everything between the brands. And so if an individual is not aware of the vav and the bet and the hey and the kuf, the letters that brand and the words that brand, that tell us when a thought begins, tells us when a story begins, when it ends, then we can easily be lost. We can easily misunderstand what Tanakh is saying, what the Bible is saying, because we're taking it outside of that brand where it's part of. It's part of that brand. And so, dear ones, just like there's so many out there that maybe feel like they're not part, I'm here to try and say, yes, you are a part. Yes, you are important. You are a creation of God. You are important. And so we stand and we look at the beautiful curtain of the Mishkan of the tabernacle, but we cannot see the vav, the silver hook that helps to hold it up. But it's there. You're important. You're helping hold the curtain up. You're important. So we have the word Vavim, and this is just a normal Gematria. When we go to Vavim and we use the final letter, the Mem, can be either the Gematria of 40 or 600. It changes to 22. So here we have the silver hooks, which now we're using it in the mystical sense of Vavim, with the Gematria being 600, and we recognize that it's related to Berachti, meaning covenant. God's covenant with His people. Then we recognize Berachot, the blessing, which is also 622. And so we recognize that little vav that's just holding the curtain up, that it's holding up the covenant that God has with His people, that it's holding up the bracha, the blessings that God has with His people. So, dear ones, even though you're quiet, even though you're silent, you're there. And you're very necessary, and you're very important. So we recognize in this week's discussion that part of the Mishkan has pieces that the human eye does not see. And those pieces are very important to being a part of the entire Mishkan. And even though maybe those that are B'nai Yisrael, they might be the poles, they might be the curtains, they might be easily identified and seen, still there are individuals who are very big supporters of the land of Israel, who send contributions to very important causes in the land of Israel, and who support the causes within Judaism. And yet they're not Jewish necessarily, or they haven't come out and said, yes, I'm Jewish, or yes, I want to be Jewish, or I have a heart that's tender towards Judaism, and I want you to be aware. No, they're the vav, they're the silver hook. They're the ones that so much hangs on, so much is dependent upon. That's some of you today, and we thank you. We thank you so much. We appreciate your contribution so much, and I hope that you'll recognize how important your contribution is. This is a perik of HaTorah. A perik is a chapter. This is Shemot Perik Lamed Chet. That means it's chapter 38. Now, I'm going to include this with the notes from the book so that you'll be able to examine it. But what I'd like to point out is that every perik begins, with a number. The number 1 is Aleph, number 2 is Bet. And if you look here at the very beginning, the very first letter is a Vav. This Vav represents that this perik, chapter 38, is connected to chapter 37. And this represents, this Vav in the second verse is connected to verse 1, which is connected to chapter 37. And so goes the branding of HaTorah that our Creator has placed in the verses, in the chapters, and in each book of HaTorah. God has the special little connectors so the people of Israel, so those that read Ivrit, those that read Hebrew, can recognize where stories begin and end, where thoughts begin and end, where parts of the Torah are all connected to each other, and then there's a break, there's a separation. Now down here in verse 10, you see the Yud there, in verse 10, there's a break. So all of these verses here are connected together. So I'll include this in the notes so that you'll be able to look at that and to see the importance of the Vav. So we have the Vav being important in the sense of helping to hold up the curtain rods. of the Mishkan, and now we have the Vav branded into the very words, the very letters, the very sentences, the chapters and books of HaTorah, which connect the Torah together. So, dear ones, everyone is important. Everyone is needed, and we don't want anyone to feel left out. I want to thank you for joining me